Hey, everybody, you're live with the Richard Listens Show. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I am live in studio with a rare opportunity. The question is, how often do you get to meet your mentor? And not in one area, but in many. Tonight, we get to speak with Mr. George Kahn, who's both a musician with over 30 years of credits, and who I got to see last night at the Catalina Bar and Grill, I believe it's called. My first time there in LA, and man, shame on me, after reading like the LA Weekly for 20 years, finally it took George coming on the show to kick my rear in gear. At least I can rhyme. But it was amazing, and not only that, but how many people come in my office and they're like, well, I want to keep my passion alive, but I don't know how to do it. How do I meet the grind? And they just keep kicking the can down the road. So today we're going to get into how to become a peak performer in the world of music, something I've often been close to, experienced in my household, but been never been able to experience myself. So I'm excited to hear about how George does it. He does it through sharing those works with charity, so many different angles that will hopefully inspire you. He has several albums, which he's going to display tonight. We'll have some clips to roll. He's playing in multiple bands, at least two that I've seen play at local jazz venues. And without further ado, he's an author, he's a father, he's a husband. He's a man of many traits, Mr. George Kahn.
Thank you, Richard. Holy smokes, what an introduction. You started off with how many times you get to meet your mentor. That's like, that's something for me to live up to already.
You see,
so.
that's the writing coach. Thank you, Raylan Johnson. Thank you. Right?
Yeah.
You got to repeat your theme throughout. But Charlie Davis of the Mighty Echoes introduced us about eight years ago, I believe, and I often think back about that, of the way in which you get introduced to someone, and being fortunate enough to be in a position to have found a home. Not many people, or many people, go through that experience in life, but the unknowns of how to navigate the businesses of life, and even for myself with a PhD in psychology, there's so many questions, and so the fact we were introduced that way, and even your outgoing voicemail, which is like, I only take clients by referral, and it's like, okay, what selective club have I entered here? Mm-hmm. So in many ways, yeah, and I refer to you, and when I'm talking to people about having someone who applies a lot of the skills, I think, of building and nurturing a relationship in business. And I'm grateful for that. And how there's, even though it's not a therapeutic relationship, it really is. And so I guess this leads me to a good question for you, George, which is, like I always perceive that a lot of people, they want to get to their music, and it's like, I've got my gig, and the passion doesn't stay in it. How have you maintained this line of care for your clientele and the work you do, and making mortgages seem like it is something that's really significant and important, rather than something that's like, that's my day gig, and I'm not invested over there?
Wow, okay. Well, I think I probably should first straighten out the connection between the music and the mortgages.
Sure.
Because excuse me. We were introduced because I do mortgages. That's how the first connection happened.
That's right.
And I've been doing mortgages in Los Angeles for 30 years now. And that was not my passion. My passion was music, So there was that transition that you didn't see that got me from music into mortgages. By the time we met, 8-9 years ago, I created this wonderful balance between my mortgage business and my music. But
it wasn't always that way.
It wasn't always that way. It wasn't always there, and it took a lot of years and a lot of finagling, to use a Jewish term, to get it
internally.
Get it
you mean like
yeah.
Can I find something else, or what do I need to do to keep producing music and playing venues?
Well, it actually was different than that. It was really my trajectory from music to mortgages was that I spent about 10 years really pursuing music. I moved to LA to do music. I wanted to be a film composer. Initially it was like, I play piano, I'll do anything, like pick me kind of thing. And then after a few years of that, I realized what I was really passionate about was doing film scoring. So I pursued that pretty aggressively. Had a modicum of success, but it was never really a living. It was really kind of, scraps from the table kind of thing. Because as
classical music doesn't pay.
Well, it doesn't pay, and it's the challenge if you're going to be in film scoring is there's only so many jobs, and there's 10 or 20 times or 100 times as many people looking for those jobs. So talent is just one small part of the ability. And I got close enough. I did a couple of I did orchestration for a couple of different composers. I did semi-episodic TV, stuff like that. And it reached the point where I got close enough to realize that it really, as a job, it really wasn't for me. It wasn't my calling, And at that point, my son was 2, and it was like, oh, yeah, time for a job now. I gotta kind of figure this out, right?
So was it, but that hit you like now? It's just like a thing that happened, but was it kind of an existential crisis of like this thing that I thought I was meant to do?
There was an existential crisis, and there was a great amount of anger and hatred of the music business. I mean, it reached the point where the music business had poisoned me to music.
Wow.
That's really what happened, and it reached the point at that time where it was like, okay, I just don't want to do music anymore. Don't want to play the piano. I just I'm just got to shut that down because any joy that was there had been sucked out of me.
Wow.
It was gone. So that was when I got into financial services. So I moved into first a stockbroker for a couple of years, and then I was then I moved into banking, and then from banking I moved to the lending side, and that process took a few years.
And all the while, music was
on the back burner. It wasn't doing anything.
And your wife, who I got to hear sing last night, in a very touching romantic song that apparently you wrote.
I wrote the music
story.
And she wrote
the
lyrics.
That's like a story behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, so was she at the time also a musician?
Yes.
Was she
well, okay. Yeah. So we met. Diana and I met about 31 years ago now. So that was when we met. I'd already established my mortgage business, and I still wasn't doing music though. But when we met, the funny thing is, when we met, I was still playing music a little bit, and she was singing in a church choir and also working as a legal secretary and had a couple other jobs. And I thought, wow, I'm finally meeting somebody that isn't a musician and has a job, and that's great. And then as soon as we got together, she went, you know what? I hate being a legal secretary. I'm going to become a musician. We're, oh no, here we go again. But then
your inner parent was like, you grew up, George. You gave it up.
No, what happened? So anyway, so it really was my wife that got me back into music. So, fast forward to about 1998 now. My wife came to me and she said, George, you've got a good mortgage business going. We're making good money. Everything's fine, but you're miserable. You're just a miserable person to be with. And, we have to change. Something's got to change.
It's always nice to hear that from your spouse.
Yeah. Something's got to change because it ain't working the way it is.
I love you, now change.
Right. But the change.
Did you know you were?
Yeah. I mean, something
was missing.
Yeah. I mean, I think I did. Yes. And in this case, what had to change was she said, you have to do music again. You've got to do some, you've got to fill that part of you somehow. And she was a soprano soloist at St. Augustine's by the Sea at the time, Episcopal Church. And she said, the director of the choir there, Bunny Thornburg, she, besides having the church choir, she has another choir called Cantori Domino. And they do 3 concerts a year of like Bach and other masterworks. And why don't you audition and maybe you can sing in the choir? And I sang in high school and I sang in a choir in college, so I can carry a tune. I'm not gonna get up and sing solo, but I can blend. So I met with Bunny, and I said I'd like to be in the choir, and she heard me sing. She said, "Great, you're in." And it was just wonderful because it was just the pleasure of singing.
No pressure.
No pressure. I didn't have to think about the gigs or when I'm going to show up or who's going to get paid or, how do I, just, it was like you show up once a week, they hand you the music, you sing, and then 3 times a year they do a performance and you show up and you perform, and it's like, and you're, surrounded by 40 or 50 other people who love singing, So that's what got the juices going again, really.
Yeah, and sometimes, when you ask a lot of performers of all different domains, that opportunity just to play is what they really miss.
Right.
In fact, you mentioned last night it was a happy day, but it was a sad day, right? We lost
Dr. John.
Dr. John, and I don't know if you were sitting with it. I was sitting with, I mentioned Charlie Davis earlier of the Mighty Echoes, and
Right.
he was sharing a story before you went on that I think Dr. John used to show up at a studio and just sit outside, and occasionally they would say, we need someone on an instrument not of his choosing.
Right.
And he was like ready to just step in.
Right.
He was like the next man up.
Right.
And that, I mean, I know of those stories from basketball maybe, or,
Right.
or you're getting a chance, someone gets injured or someone doesn't show up. But
Right.
I never think of a musician that's like can be a career launcher.
Absolutely can.
And so for you, it was the Episcopal choir.
Well, yeah, and again, the fact that there was no pressure. There's I think if you talk to many professional musicians, they would say the same thing, that because it becomes a job and you're making a living, you're always focused on the next gig that'll pay, as opposed to the pleasure of singing or playing. So I got to get in touch with that again, and so the next thing that happened was I went up to Bunny and I said, I compose, and maybe I can write some music for the choir. And she says, "When will it be ready?" I went, "Oh, okay. Guess I got to get to work." So I started writing music for the choir, and I wrote some psalm settings, and I wrote a couple of movements of a mass, and whatever I would write, they'd perform. And so that kind of got the singing, composing, got everything kind of going again. And at that point, I thought, well, look, I could.
I take it turned out well.
Well, yeah, it turned out well, and that I realized that, I didn't have to think about music as a way to make a living at that point, And so I said to myself, if I just wanted to do music for pleasure, for the pleasure of doing it, what would I choose to do? What kind of music would I want to do? And I realized that whenever I'd be home in the evening, and if I wanted to listen to some music and chill out or whatever, I'd always choose a classic jazz album. I'd put on Miles Davis' Kind of Blue, or some early Herbie Hancock, or maybe Les McCann and Eddie Harris, something in that vein, And I thought, well, that's what I love, and so why don't I just do that? Why don't I just become a jazz pianist, that plays classical jazz, classic jazz from the 50s and 60s. And that's what I started doing.
Yeah.
So that was 20 years ago.
And you could tell how much joy that gives you when you're out there on stage. You're like, some of the song titles, right? You're like, imagine if this musician walked in and sat down and played with Miles Davis.
Right.
And, you create an image and you create an experience of the classic.
Well, I'm a bit of a jazz historian as well. I've studied West Coast jazz and the people that created it, and so I enjoy sharing that. I think that's one of the we're going to digress a little bit here, but one of the problems with jazz is getting an audience, getting people to show up, because jazz is not exactly, on the top of everyone's mind, especially if they're younger, But I think part of the reason for that is that a lot of jazz musicians don't really focus on communicating with the audience. They got their licks, they got their,
It's very open to interpretation.
Yeah. And some people, rightfully or wrongfully, who aren't musicians, think jazz, that's that squeaky, squawky stuff. I don't want to go there because it's too weird, So when I perform, I really try to not only play music that's melodic and accessible, but also to give some of the backstory and, let people, kind of get a picture, of what's going on.
Yeah, so you make it accessible to your audience. Like, you're not making them struggle with long periods of tension, right?
Right. Or like one song that everybody takes 20 minute solos on, and it's like, what the hell are they doing on? Let's figure this out. So yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the long, short story of how I got back into music.
But you can feel your passion when you're playing in front of an audience. Like when you explain a story like that, you kind of hear some people give a few, deep exhales of like, they're really getting your vision.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite stories, which I didn't tell last night, but one of my favorite stories that I tell on gigs often is, I play places like the Catalina Jazz Club and other jazz clubs have been around for 25, 30 years or more, And I like telling the story that back when I was growing up, like in the 60s and 70s, every town in America, every city of any reasonable size had a jazz club. And each jazz club would have a band, and they'd come and they'd play for the week, and they'd play 2 or 3 sets a night, and they'd be there for a week. And then at the end of the week, they'd pick up and they'd go to the next city, and they'd play for a week. And you could actually make a living as a jazz musician touring the country like that. What a concept.
Not any longer.
Not any longer. That's that. Yeah.
Now you just put it up on YouTube.
Put it up on YouTube, but the cities, very few cities have jazz clubs, that are like listening rooms. There's plenty of places that have the piano bar or whatever. But there's, it's just it's not a dying breed, but it's that format, the idea that you could do that as a living and actually be a jazz musician. Just that's what you do. Yeah. That doesn't exist, I don't think.
Yeah. So for all our listeners who are out there, grinding in the day job and maybe struggling with finding the passion, or like which came first? Did you put the passion into mortgages, or did you rediscover music and then that gave you the permission to just focus on being great, building your client list?
Oh, that's a really good question. So actually this brings up the topic of a mentor, really, because when I got into the mortgage business, I had no clue except I knew I wanted to make money, right? And I had a couple of mentors along the way there, and one of the mentors was the branch manager of the savings and loan I was working for. Not the branch manager, but the regional manager. And I sat down with him after I'd been working at the bank for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I said, I really like working here. It's really nice, but the pay sucks. It's like working in a library, and they're paying me like I'm working in a library. How, where's the money? He said, well, you're in the wrong part of the banking business. If you want to make money, right now you're on the saving side. You have to move to the lending side, because on the saving side, we're paying people to give us money. We're giving them an interest rate. But when you loan money, people are paying us to loan them the money. So that's where the profit is for the bank. So it's kind of reversed. You got to move to the lending side. And I went, okay, light bulb, I'll do that. So that was the first big aha. And then after fumbling around in the mortgage business for quite a few years, I'd say 5 or 6 years, maybe 7, and kind of making a living, but not really making a living, I connected with a mentor, a guy named Joe Stump, who is he's a business coach, but he specifically works in the real estate and the mortgage industry. And I connected with him, and I've been with him now for 20 years. And a lot of people say, it's a long time to be with a coach. Hasn't he taught you what you need to know by now? But it's like never-ending improvement. It's a constant evolution. But what I did learn from him was the idea of building a business from the inside out and going deep rather than wide. Because a lot of people in business.
So slow that down, extrapolate that a little bit if you could. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people in the mortgage business, but in many, many businesses, think I got to go wide. In other words, I'll run an ad on Facebook, and I'll, send flyers out, and I'll buy a billboard and whatever. And the more people that know me, I'm bound to get business. What Joe's method is, you do a loan for somebody, and that person is your advocate. And that person knows people. And that person will introduce you to people. So if you do that right, each transaction has your client, has a realtor, has an escrow company, has an appraiser. There's all these people that are connected with each thing. And then the person who moves into the house, he's suddenly got new neighbors who they so that's the way to build your business, is to, do exceptional work for the person so they feel almost duty bound to refer somebody to you because you did such an exceptional job for them. They're like, oh my God, I have to give George some business because
it's he's a great mentor then, because it does. Psychologically in business and feeling like someone is there to educate you. And there's been a number of times personally I've tried to ask George for business or referred family, and he said, nope, you're good, sorry, I can't help you. So the trust in oneself to say, right, I'm in it for the relationship rather than the possible short term.
Right.
I've had mortgage brokers just like fill out complete, like all you got to do is sign on the dotted line, and it doesn't quite look in your best interest. So
Right.
There's a lot of room in all kinds of services, including psychological, to fudge the ethical lines.
Right.
And especially when you're trying to fuel your passion, you can see how like the motivation to take care of promoting one's own career could get in the way. But
Right.
maintain this way of treating mortgages with care and following the system. So does he hold you accountable, or do you go to him with like areas of being stuck? How do you keep it growing after 20 years?
There's his system. It does include a lot of accountability, and a lot of flexibility, in that you're not always doing the same thing. But I'm in a what we call a do group. There's 3 of us that meet on either a phone or video chat once a week. We make commitments what we're going to do that week. So there's that accountability aspect of it. It's a deep system. It's hard to, I can't summarize it here.
Right.
But and again, what he's created is specifically really mortgage and real estate related, but there's so much of it that is interchangeable. And I've used a lot of the things I learned from Joe in my music, not writing music, but in, the music career, having it build. And I think the big thing I learned from him, which again took a few years to learn, was that I have the permission, or I can give myself the permission to share my music and my mortgages with everybody, because when I started, and some of your listeners may relate to this, when I started in the mortgage business, I worked for a company that placed me in real estate offices. And the first office I was in Marina del Rey. And the manager, right when I started, the manager sat me down and he said, "Hey, I understand you're a musician. Well, you're not a musician here. When you're in my office, you're a mortgage guy, and I don't want to, you're just going to talk mortgages, and you're going to service our realtors, and it's mortgage. I'm going, gee, thanks.
How'd you take that?
Thanks for sharing." But at the time, it was like I was just starting the business, and I'm going, this guy must be right. He's the manager, And it took me a long time to realize that, the what's your rate is really simple, and anybody can answer that question. But to really share who you are with somebody can make all the difference.
Yeah, and that dilemma comes up for therapists and coaches as well. They teach you to keep this, very strict boundaries, and if a client asks you a question about your personality,
right? Well, that's something you've got to deal with, yeah. Because I've been in some therapy over the years, and I know there's this, this very it's not a fungible line that you got to keep your personal.
Well, people have different, interpretations on how much you self-disclose and different comfort levels, and I don't know if there's a right answer, but certainly even being on the show or being out there and wanting to speak in front of people, the more public you are, the more people come in having seen who your public identity is. In a way, they get more of a glimpse, especially with social media and all the things we're trying to do and showcase in the world through Richard Listens or Richard Travels and all the people we get to meet.
Right.
How can I not share about the amazing work of the Hollywood curling community with paraplegics? It's like there's amazing things. We're going to have a video with Peter Sobey, my former host. He just did scuba diving as a quadriplegic.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so there's amazing organizations out there. So I'll share with people to the extent that I think it'll help them. But always monitoring those lines is a careful thing. And
Right.
so, thinking about the client in front of you and what are they really asking from me. But
Right.
in truth, it's been a great, it's exciting, when you're doing a deal to get a book or an invitation to a music concert that might benefit the homeless. It's offering more value.
Right.
Right. So I think that concept, which is really taken on with the millennial age of adding value to your clients, whether or not they can make it to every resource you give them,
Right.
you're getting much more than the deal is kind of a one-time thing, but the relationship can provide many, many other resources.
Right. And I really appreciate the relationship we've developed. I mean, we've worked together for many years, and I've watched you grow.
Thank
Amazingly, it's been wonderful to watch. And now you invite me on your radio show, which is
it's nice to return. Yeah,
I know.
it's really nice to return, and I mean it's to have people talk about mentors, people who are modeling the walk, who raise families, who get out in the world and make a living. And at the same time still keep pursuing passion. So it's amazing to see. I mean, last night you had the two guys you had with you, Alex, these are like really talented musicians. You're not just trying to bring anybody with you who's available tonight, right? I mean, you must bring some other principles into who do you perform with? And I mean, is that just purely the people you love being with? Or?
That actually came from when I started doing albums. I was a conscious decision. That I realized.
Is this a time we should share a clip? Is there a clip?
Yeah,
Do we have a clip on?
Yeah, can we play something? That would be great.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that. We're mixing with our multimedia functions here on the Richard Listen Show. So, what was that? What was that one called?
It's called Dreamin'.
Dreamin'. Is that off?
It's on this album. I happen to have a copy here.
Oh, that's a new one, released last year.
Yeah, released Straight Ahead. It's called. So actually, you saw this band last night. It was Alex Acuna on drums, Lyman Medeiros on bass.
Wow.
Myself on piano.
Yeah.
So
and don't forget the cowbell.
And the cowbell, yes. Alex is amazing. He's really known more as a percussionist than a drummer. He was the drummer with Weather Report back in the early days. He played on Heavy Weather and a couple of other albums. Good friends with Jocko back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's been around. He's played with everybody. So, we talked about relationships. It's really, you get to know one person who they know. So, I could kind of follow the chain of names of people that finally introduced me to Alex. But when we first met, Alex played on an album of mine about 10 years ago. And he doesn't always get a call to play drums because he's really known as a percussionist. And the fact that I gave him the opportunity to play drums on my album was a thrill for him just because he doesn't get that call that often. And the music's great. And that's another thing I've discovered is if you write really good music and allow people space to express themselves, really great musicians will show up because they're starved for that opportunity.
Yeah. So you've taken on, you're not only the composer and the lead pianist. I mean, you also kind of are the organizer.
Yeah, I'm the producer, the director, the chief cook and bottle washer. Yeah, it's my own record label. It's it's a DIY production here. Yeah.
So just from our producers, and were when they were thinking about all you're doing, they were saying, well, and every peak performer, right? Is there ever a time when physically, just from playing the keys and so many concerts, and so you're pushing yourself to perform on so many levels, where there's injuries, there's cramping up. I mean, how does it in one level, impact the other?
Haven't had injuries, physical, mental, mental injuries. Yes, yes. There's definitely a limit to my my abilities in terms of time and expertise. Again, because the mortgage business is how I make my living, that requires a certain amount of hours every week. So I do. I try to play out maybe once a month. So I try to space my performances out, so I'm not playing every weekend or every night, that kind of thing.
So you found kind of a healthier balance. For
yeah,
you
and it's at this point, again, after years of fitting it all together, it's at a very sweet spot right now where I play out generally about once a month, play the better clubs in town. Now this last month, in the last 4 weeks, I think I've done 4 gigs, which is unusual for me. I did a mini tour up to Berkeley and Sonoma, and I did a couple of shows up there over Memorial Day weekend, and then I just did this show here, and I did one about earlier in May also. So that's pretty much my limit. I was like, this morning when I woke up, I was like, oh, where am I? But the amazing thing was that
time to build the home office.
Yeah, I think so. Really, the amazing thing was that really I felt I played pretty much better than ever last night, and the fact that I had these 3 gigs in a short period of time really
get you in the flow.
Got me in the flow. Yeah, it really did. So it wasn't like, oh, how am I going to do this tonight? It was more the morning after.
Does it help playing with the same guys? Because I noticed,
Yes.
and I don't know the terminology, but it's kind of like the handoff in basketball. Like you're ready to give it off to Lyman.
Oh yeah.
And then he's giving you the look back, like, all right, you're ready to kick it back in.
Yeah.
The nonverbal communication.
It was very high last night.
It's very high. Yeah. Whatever that is.
It's that telepathy thing. Yeah.
Is that built in, or is it just them being high-level musicians?
It's a combination of the two. I mean, I've worked with this. This was like the A team that you saw last night. Really, I've been doing gigs with Pat, the guitar player, pretty regularly for about a year and a half, maybe once every 2 or 3 months. And Lyman I've worked with for about 5 years, and Alex whenever he's available. Alex is like a special call. He doesn't show up that often, but
he's a fabulous. I wish we had a clip from that. Is there?
Well,
a clip from that?
if you play Thieves, he's playing drums.
Yeah, because I just before you hit it, I mean his facial expression, the amount of joy. I don't know if they'll be able to see it. Is it just a musical clip or is it a video clip? Okay, well, just track this. The amount of joy and focus coming from Alex there. I was soaking it up. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Yeah. All right. So playing nonverbals, being in tune with your team, a lot of crossovers to sports.
Absolutely. And with jazz is a language really, and when you learn the language of jazz, you can speak to anybody that knows that language. However, there are people that know it better than others. Alex is an extreme example of that. I mean, Alex, we don't rehearse. People always ask me, "Oh, you must rehearse a lot because you're so tight." I'm going, we'll play for a sound check before the gig.
Wow.
And we go over each tune, and he goes, "Oh, this one, do I start this one? Or is it a bossa or is it a straight 8? And I'll make some notes, and then it's perfect."
He's just trying to get down the tempo or the beat.
Yeah, the beat, the feel. yeah, it's just he's one of these guys that just has total recall, of what he's done and what he's doing.
I always think back to that line from White Men Can't Jump between Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes when he's like, you listen to Jimmy. He says, you can't hear Jimmy. And I always feel a little bit of like that, like kind of on the outside, trying to get a grasp of what's going on, and it's really impressive when it's done with joy and flow and inclusion. It's a tremendous feel of being like, especially, I got spoiled, got to sit up close last night, but when you really feel a part of that experience, it's kind of like the flow experience, which a lot of people are trying to research in music and sports, of just feeling like something is innovative and creative, and it's manifesting before you. So,
right. And that is the magic of music, when you get into that spot.
Yeah.
And like sports, the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So did you play basketball professionally? Was that part of your?
I did not play professionally. In fact, my biggest motivator is it's a similar, I'd say, journey to yours at an earlier age, in that I loved basketball. I was passionate about basketball, and probably would have been Division III basketball player. Let's face it, I had a big man game, and at the higher levels, I'm short.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
But part of that is even part of the experience of I was self-taught. I found my mentors in, upstate New York, coaches on vacation. I mean, I was just a gym rat who was playing with people much older than me, and I just wanted to be around the game all the time, including, I was a guinea pig for those strength shoes that they sold, the Reebok. Did you see those things? They were like platform shoes that were supposed to strengthen your ankles. Yes. Right. Guilty. Purchased. So I never got to play, and some of that was like that at the time, family financial hardships. I had to go to work kind of very early on in college. So but I still became similar to your organizer role. I began to organize 3-on-3 basketball tournaments. They hosted one at the University of Florida. I organized, so it became a way to raise money. It became a way to bring people together. It always became my society of bringing people of different areas of my life, whether they be people I knew from summer camp and hometown to my varsity basketball team. So it was always this thread for me, and it wound up being a way I got to kind of travel around the country and playing on different teams and like that.
Oh, wow.
And I got to learn about team dynamics. I got to learn about how come teams with the most talent didn't win, yet the teams that loved each other, and you didn't really care if one game you were 8th on the bench or one game you were 4th, or the main scorer, why there was still love and fun in the process. So there's always been this curiosity about me. I've always been a thinking player. And for me, my love back into sports has reshifted into realizing that after, fully investing in my craft as a psychologist and everything that goes into becoming brighter and accruing more degrees, that I was becoming a little bit more disconnected from my own self. And I probably, a lot of people in the medical professions go through this, because I know that they're coming in my office. I'm dealing with a lot of peak performers, ER physicians. I mean, there's high pressure, high training, but not a lot of experience of being in your own body or joy. So led me down a whole path of somatic psychology and re-identifying myself, that no matter what life experiences have happened to me, I can still identify as athlete and getting back into my own athletic potential. So I started doing CrossFit 5 or 6 days a week. Wow. And through my own children, then getting involved in coaching and being on fields and being around athletes again. And in a way, it's made me, I think, younger, quicker, right? Even as our show producer will say, getting back in the moment and less in this bogged down thinking process, which often comes off as, I'll have soccer coaches come up to me and say, whoever that guy was who was over there out thinking everything, like, there's two different people that they're interacting with. So, and I've continued playing basketball to this day. It's become a way for me to mentor. I mean, I'm playing basketball with guys that I used to carry around on my shoulders when they were 12 now. So, wow. It's become a much different role for me. It's less of a physical game than it is a mental game. And it's become a whole nother way for me to get back connected to helping people both I think some people say your ideal client is yourself. So today when I'm out at the Windward School and I'm meeting with young athletes, I mean, they may not look like me on the surface, but I can certainly understand with what it's like to be 15, 16, struggling with really wanting to find yourself in life, but through your sport and through your team. And so that inspires me, and that concept of mentors, where not everyone has someone who's watching them struggle or when things shift maybe in one area of their life, to kind of give them the support or a system to succeed within. So I hope to provide that. And now I think there's a big shift from high school sports on up in terms of addressing the mental side of the game, and seeing, a lot more professional athletes are coming out and saying, hey, I may be an all-star and making millions of dollars, but I have anxiety disorder, or I've been depressed. I mean,
that has been a real big shift in the sports field, isn't it?
The smoke screen is getting pulled back, and it's a real thing that motivates me. These are human beings. I mean, we're taught through the television or through the salaries. There's a certain entitlement we have, or we need them to be something for us, to fulfill something for us. But these are definitely human beings, and it must be really intense to be in that public eye all the time without the ability to process emotions, or to be taught to process emotions only through your sport. And if there's stigma built into the sport, I mean, baseball has now come very far along. I think 30 out of 32 teams have a mental skills consultant.
Really?
They still call them mental skills. I think the stigma is still there. But it used to be, if they wanted to get a mental skills consultant in the Yankee Stadium, they had to put him in a UPS uniform and send him down the freight elevator. I mean, I kid you not. These are the stories. So, it's a true joy to see that it's shifting and coming along, and to be a part of that. I got to be at the unfortunate demise of the Mets as they collapsed the Dodgers about 10 days ago here in town. And I got to be sitting next to one of the players' grandmothers.
Oh, my goodness.
And you just get the feeling of like, wow, they're very vulnerable. These guys are really in a vulnerable position. If you're not on that night, I mean...
well, they only have 50,000 people staring at them.
And that was social media nowadays. I mean, how many times do you come off stage and you get an indirect message on Instagram like, hey, George, you really bungled thieves last night?
Yeah, that doesn't happen in the jazz world, luckily, but it does happen in sports.
Music has a little bit more respect for it.
Yeah, a little bit more kindness there, I guess.
So, thank you for turning the interview on me. That'll be our next show. George will be... But tell us, George, you got your albums here. Tell us more about, your work with different charities and what productions you have coming up, and how people can see you and get a hold of you, all that good stuff.
Well, good. Okay. So my next show is that is a public show anyway, is on August 1st. We're playing at the Culver City Summer Music Festival. They have 6 Thursdays in front of the Culver City Hall.
That's always fun.
And we're going to be doing August 1st. And that'll be with my large band. I actually have 2 bands. I have the one you saw last night, which is the George Kahn Quartet or Trio or Quintet, depending on, whatever it is, based on my name. And then the other group is called the Jazz and Blues Review, which is a much larger group. It's an 8-piece group with 3 female singers. And this is more of a
they're great.
History of jazz vocal type group, where we do the Andrews Sisters, we do the Pointer Sisters, we do some Etta James, we'll do some Ella. It'll be a variety of stuff. So this year, we're doing a tribute to Aretha Franklin. We try to keep things fresh, pick a different singer, and just with Aretha passing away last year, it just seemed the absolute appropriate thing to do. So we're going to be doing 5 or 6 Aretha tunes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It'll be a lot of fun. And the Culver City Music Festival is really a place where people get up and dance and boogie and stuff. So we're going to be focusing more on the danceable tunes, so more on the rhythm and blues side of the jazz and blues spectrum.
They got a little bit of a dance floor there.
Yes,
it gets crowded, doesn't it?
It does. They'll get a couple of thousand people.
So come
there.
early, bring your picnic.
Yeah, it's free, and music will start at 7 on August 1st. So hope to see you there. And then the same group, the Jazz and Blues Review, will be doing a benefit for Path and Path Ventures coming up in on September. I think it's 12th, but it's coming up in September. That'll be at the Broad Theater in Santa Monica. And that's a fundraiser. I think tickets are $150 each, so it's the other spectrum as opposed to free. It's not free, but the money goes to help build housing for the homeless.
Really important topic right now. If you've been reading the LA
if
Times.
you look in the paper or look on the street, you know what a crisis we have right now with the homeless situation here in Los Angeles. So what the group I raise money for is specifically building housing for the formerly homeless and also paying for services for the housing, so that not only give a person a place to live, but there's psychological help, job training, etc. to get people.
It's
back
really
mainstream.
significant and really amazing what Path does. Having worked with them when I was down on Skid Row, and just real quick to interject, the time is now in terms of helping with homeless ventures, and my former work with U.S. Vets down in Inglewood, seeing what a community that can provide job training support can do. It's not enough. I mean, it's great if you can give a few dollars for a meal, but providing an environment that helps people help one another is probably the most empowering aspect. So,
so that's
good on you and Path.
Yeah, so those are the two next things I've got coming up. So, and there's albums. I've got 9 albums. You can find them on Spotify, GeorgeContrio.com. You can listen to the music, download some videos. It's just Google me. And
is that the best place to find you? Spotify, YouTube?
Yeah, well, that's those are the best places to listen. If you want to buy the material, it's on Apple Music, Pandora. You can buy it through Pandora. You can, and then CD Baby is my actual website for physical and download distribution. So cdbaby.com.
Great gifts for your family members, parents. Father's Day coming up.
Absolutely, yeah. All good music. Yeah. Here they are.
So what about George? What's the message? We got 2 minutes left.
Oh my God.
What's the message for the young guy out there? He's a dad and he's got to go to work, and it's not necessarily his passion. Yeah. What's somebody out there? You're in LA. Everybody's got a dream.
Yeah, I would say whatever that dream is, just do it. Do a little bit of it every day, or if you can't do it every day, do it a couple of times a week. Whether it's writing a short story or sitting down or starting to play guitar or pick up the flute that you played in high school, whatever it is. Just do it. It's the Nike. Just do it thing, That's where it starts. Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing else like experiencing yourself in your own joy.
Yeah,
that's really it. People here.
That's the thing. It's like as what's her face says. What does it spark joy? If you don't know what sparks joy, take a minute and figure out what's going to spark my joy, and then just do that.
The show doesn't go by without a Marie Kondo reference. If you haven't watched it on Netflix, and if you'd like to learn how to fold drawers,
right,
for all of you out there.
No, if I have to get her to use my music for her background music, then I'd be all set.
Hey, I'll make the pitch.
All right, let's talk to Marie. Get that done.
This is great. Well, it's really a true honor for me to bring a mentor, a friend, and someone who's out there who's just, when I'm feeling low, or how am I going to keep pushing my passions forward, and I get something in the mail that says, come out and hear some music. Get out of your comfort zone and come experience this world. It really pushes me, and it's beautiful, the stories you tell and the imagery you create through the stories and through your writing. I want to thank you for that gift and for sharing it. And I encourage you to keep doing so, and encourage all of you, if you can't get to see George live, and if you certainly can download, and you certainly can ask a few questions of yourself. How can I get more in touch with my passion, and who can I ask to be my mentor, and where do I want to feel more joy? Thank you, Marie Kondo, for that indirect reference. If not, we will be back, I believe, in 2 weeks' time. And we thank you, as always, for tuning in, downloading. Thank you with your patience on getting up on Spotify and iTunes. But please listen, share it, give us feedback. Who else would you like to have on? What other realms have gone untapped? We want to be pushed by you and add value to you. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great evening and enjoy your summer. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Richard. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.